Alright, hello everybody, this is the Buff Shaman, and I'm going to be doing my Power Rangers movie review today. I'm doing this unscripted, and I'm going to say right now there will be spoilers, so if you haven't watched it, I'm going to give you my review right now. It is a definite must-see for fans. Now I'm going to be moving on to the spoiler version of the review now. If you don't want spoilers, stop now. Now, I've been somebody who's been very, very against reboots in general because they tend to lose more than they put in of the original source material in many, many cases. Friday the 13th, Halloween, Star Trek, the list goes on and on. You know, reboots that just weren't right. Well, I was a fan of the original show, and like many of the kids around at the time, I wouldn't have admitted it at the time, but we were all watching it and we all liked it. So the trailer comes out, and I really enjoyed the trailer. I didn't expect to like the trailer. I actually was dead set to not like it, and ended up liking what I saw in the trailer. And even though I didn't get to go see the movie when it came out, as soon as it came out, I had to wait because of financial reasons to see it. It was worth the wait. And there's certain scenes in there, like, I do have nitpicks about this, and I have a lot of nitpicks, but I think overall it was a better movie than a lot of reboots are. And now I'm going to move on. I'm going to save my favorite part of the movie later, but essentially it opens up with Zordon, who is in this reboot continuity, the Red Ranger from eons past. So anyways, they any planet that has life has a certain type of crystal, and they were sent here to protect the crystal from Rita, who actually has a power coin in this one, a green one, in fact. So they end up failing in their duty, but Zordon ends up calling in a suicide, I guess for lack of a better word, artillery strike using a meteor. And sets the coins up to be collected by whoever's worthy in the future. Now he intends to come back using the morphin grid when they morph, and that becomes a big part of the plot later. But the kids find it. Turns out that they're all mostly troubled teens. I really love how they went into this new direction. Instead of the really squeaky clean, perfect kids that the original Power Rangers always seemed to be, these ones were much less so, and it made the characters much more relatable. Now, one of the things that I really didn't like, one of my big nitpicks, is that fairly early on you get introduced to Jason and Billy, and Billy's getting picked on by a bully. I really wish they would have had some form, paid better tribute to Bulk and Skull, who were a big part of the original series, and it's one of my big nitpicks. But moving along with the story, you get introduced to Kimberly shortly thereafter, and just you get the real understanding right from the beginning that these kids are not just good kids. They are dealing with some crap in their lives. And what the indications are with Jason, it seems like, at least what I gathered from the scenes with his father, it seems like his father really wants to push him into being that football star, and he doesn't really want to be that football star. And doesn't want his life to go in the same direction that his father wants it to go in. Now, it's not that the father's a bad father, it's just that they don't understand each other. So, I like that dynamic. I disagree with the way they made Billy's intelligence tied to autism. At least that's how I saw it. I just thought it was an unnecessary move if they wanted to do something else with his character. I think they could have done it better, or at least written it better. But going on from here, Billy ends up convincing Jason to, who's on house arrest, by the way, from an incident at the beginning of the movie. But anyways, Billy needs Jason to take him up somewhere. And Jason says, "Nah, I can't. I got this ankle bracelet on there, this ankle monitor." And Billy's like, "Oh, don't worry about that. I can fix that." So Jason decides to go, and Billy does some little stuff with the laptop and with the little card inside the ankle monitor, and Jason's no longer under house arrest. And anyway, they go up there and up to it's a mining town and a port town. Angel Grove is in this movie, and they go up to the mine area, and they're not supposed to be up there, but they're there, and there you find you see Zach and Trinity off doing their own thing. It doesn't really put them into the story that well, but it kind of feels like early on that they're just kind of thrown in there because they had to be there, and eventually they do a better job with the characters, but their introduction, I think, could have been done better. Well, turns out that Jason is getting kind of bored helping Billy carry his stuff up, so he takes off and finds Kimberly cliff diving, and they have their little moment there, and so Billy blows up part of the top of the mountain that the mine is in, and Jason and Kimberly and Zach and not so much Trini, they all book it to where Billy was, where the explosion came from, and then Trini comes up on top of the unstable rock wall. It kind of collapses, and then they notice the power coins in crystallized silicon, glass from where the meteor impacted. And Zach actually digs them out. Anyways, they suddenly have the security forces from the mine. They're not supposed to be up there. The security comes in, chases them off. They're screaming out through, trying to get away, and they got a train coming in the railroad crossing, and Jason decides to try and get across the railroad crossing. Well, they don't make it, and then the next thing you know, they kind of wake up. The next day, perfectly fine in their own homes, and starting to notice that they kind of have superpowers. So, just a really fun scene. I love the scene where there's a scene where Kimberly kind of just crushes her phone by accident, and the same bully from earlier, he tries to assault Billy in the hall. He tries to actually break his wrist. He can't break his wrist, so he tries to headbutt him and knocks himself out. So, of course, the whole school sees this, and now everybody's, hey, Billy's awesome. And before he was the outcast, which was, I liked that scene. Uh, the uh, Kimberly and Jason, they come in and say, hey, look, we gotta talk. So they pull him aside and they talk about how they're, not feeling themselves, and they kind of get into the super strength and everything. And they decide to go back up there to where they found the power coins. And Zach happens to be there, and they go through the little discussion there. And Trini eventually comes along, and she's more reluctant to get involved. And her trying to not get involved is actually what leads them to find the ship that Zordon is in Alpha. Now, I really love what they did with Alpha in this. He's not just a bungling robot anymore. He is a serious butt-kicking machine. Now, the kids they want nothing to do with this. They're like, at first they think they're trapped, and then they're like, I don't know, do we really have a choice but to cooperate? And so eventually they cooperate and meet Zordon, and they're explained to what's going on. Now, he has them try to morph, and I really dislike how they did the morphing thing in this movie. I really wish they would have stuck to the power morphers and had the problem be controlling the power of the morph, but rather being able to morph was one of the big plot points. Zordon needed them to morph to come back from the dead. Now, since they can't morph, Zordon says, okay, we'll just have to train you without your armor. And it's just a lot of fun watching them try to fight these holographic putties. I wish they would have done a better job designing these also, because they're basically the generic Earth Elemental type things from every MMO fantasy game that you've played over the last 10 years. So I thought they could have been less lazy about designing those, but they weren't, and it is what it is. So eventually they get to take a look at their Zords, and Alpha's trying to use this to motivate them to morph. And so anyways, Alpha's like, yeah, but you can't use those very effectively until you morph, so you better get to work. Takes them off, and Zach happens to look back, and next scene is him piloting his Zord, although very clumsily. And it almost takes out a car of nuns. Such a cliche joke there. Just it wasn't funny, but it is something of a staple. But anyway, he kind of crashes back into the tunnels where the rest of them are. He almost as the Zord is kind of sliding, he almost runs over the rest of the Rangers with it. Now that was funny, but Jason kind of finds out that Zordon needs them to morph so he can come back to life. So they have a little bit of a falling out. Also, a little bit before that, Zach and Jason get into a kind of a fight, and Billy tries to break it up, and he ends up successfully morphing. I think this scene was kind of wasted because they could have used that story-wise to catapult them into figuring out how to morph, but they didn't, and it just ends up being a wasted scene. It just had a lot of potential to move the plot along and didn't, and it sort of plods along later after the fact. So uh, now we get to the mountaintop, and where they start really beginning to connect as friends, the whole group, and Trini. This is where they start to bring her character into it more, and I don't want to give too much of this away because it is an impactful scene, and I think knowing what's going to happen in this particular scene would actually diminish. So, even though this is a spoiler, I am going to refrain from telling you exactly what happens with her and her character. Uh, but long story short, a lot of development for her character in this scene and the next scene. And anyways, the Rangers find out that Rita's going to be attacking Angel Grove in the morning, and they come in and try and stop her without being able to morph. And this leads to the scene I'm going to discuss at the end of the review. So I'm going to skip over this scene and its subsequent effects. But eventually the Rangers morph, and Zordon doesn't come back. He kind of allows Jason to take up the mantle of leadership. And then Rita ends up resurrecting Goldar. This whole time she's trying to resurrect Goldar, taking gold, because Goldar can dig his way to the crystal, which is now buried. This crystal, if it's removed from the planet, life on the planet will become extinct. It'll just die off. It is the source of life on any planet. So, with the Power Rangers now morphed, they charge into battle, and in their Zords, and it's kind of a. I'm trying to think of the right way to describe this scene. Well, first they're going off with trying to go on foot, and they end up having to fight putties, and they're just outnumbered so vastly. So Zach ends up going and getting the Zord, his Zord, and the rest of the Rangers, after his Zord kind of takes care of the putty problem, go back and get theirs. They hit in. Now, out of all the Zords here, I have to say I was the most impressed with the way that they handled the pterodactyl Zord. They actually give her legit strafing runs in this thing. Now, the old pterodactyl Zord, it kind of had those lightning laser things that it was corny. We loved it as kids, but it was corny. And I don't think it would have fit very well into the tone of the movie. But the strafing, this did fit well. Now, Kimberly's very effective at working as a team here. She picks up Zach Zord and sort of sends him in, helps him get to Rita, knocks her out for a little while, and when she gets knocked out, the army of putties basically die. Now, when that happens, Rita and Goldar both kind of pass out, but Goldar kind of reaches over and picks Rita up, puts her back on her feet, and so the Rangers take a defensive stance at the opening where the crystal's at, and hold the line. Now, any Mass Effect fan is gonna really love this scene, because it's hold the line. I don't know if that was intentional or if it just happens to be, but it was. I like the scene a lot because of that. Now, coming up, Goldar's pushing the Zords and fighting the Zords, and they're losing, but they're just hold the line. Kimberly tries to come down to pull Jason's T-Rex Zord out of there, and kind of gets caught and starts getting crushed. anyways, he kind of crushes them all up into this big ball and tosses them into the pit where the crystal's at. And I wish they hadn't have done this way, but this is where they become the Megazord, and you don't actually get to see it. Now, one of my favorite things in the original series was watching the Zords come together and transform into the Megazord. Now, in this one, don't get me wrong, the Megazord is awesome, but I really would have liked to see that transformation. It really would have been neat. So, here's the Megazord, and they kind of they kind of fall down in it. I really liked that. I liked it more than I should have, but it's just, it goes back to the whole, they aren't perfect. They don't do everything right and always succeed the first time, and I think it's one of the best comical scenes in the movie. And anyways, once they've merged, Rita kind of merges with Goldar, and they basically proceed to beat the living snot out of Goldar, and eventually, stab it with a pair of wings that are made from the pterodactyl Zord's, a pair of swords made from the pterodactyl Zord's wings. Excuse me. Now, Rita essentially starts, saying, don't kill me, just let me go. And so the Rangers are like, no, surrender your staff and your coin, and we'll let Zordon decide. And early in the movie, I didn't mention this, but you kind of actually, I'm not gonna mention that again because it's part of the scene where Trini is involved in. Anyways, long story short, it turns out Rita and Zordon have a history of sorts. Not a romantic history, but she basically refuses to allow Zordon to pass judgment on her because she really looks down on Zordon. And I'd like to see if they could make sort of at the very least, a direct-to-DVD movie on that history. But anyways, she then tries to attack the Megazord, and they just kind of knock her into space, and she freezes up there. And the movie has a cameo of two of the original Power Rangers, Kimberly and Tommy, I believe. But so then it goes on to later on, and Billy's in his basement taking down all the strategy, pinpointing, plotting stuff that he had been doing during earlier parts of the movie, and his mom calls down to him and tells him that the rest of the Rangers, obviously not identified as the Rangers, are there, and he gets this smile and just touching in. Now, the best scene in the movie, I thought, is when they actually go to confront Rita. Billy knows the plotting that I'm talking about. Billy knows and figured out where the crystal was. So Rita, somehow or another, knows that one of them knows and knows it's him, and essentially tells him to tell her, or she's going to start killing the rest of the Rangers one by one until he does. So she starts with Zach, and she's gonna kill Zach. And he stops her and tells her before she kills Zach what she wants to know. And turns out that the crystal is underneath a Krispy Kreme. So Now, she basically says, well, Zordon wouldn't respect me if I didn't kill at least one of you. And so she decides to kill Billy. And uh, one of the best examples I think I've ever seen of using music to really drive home the emotional impact of a scene. Bootstraps, Stand By Me, a redo or cover, if you will, of Ben E. King's classic. And it's really brought tears to my eyes. And a really emotionally impactful scene, and it's what eventually it's what puts the drive into the rest of the Rangers to morph, and they take him back to the ship without morphing yet. They take him back to the ship, and Zordon's like, "I can't help him. It's too late." So they basically vow that Rita's not gonna get away with this, and that they really come into it's about the team now, and that's how they get to morph. And Zordon needed them to morph to come back from the dead, but at this point, he instead chooses to send Billy back, and it's a very, very touching scene, and I don't think it would have been as impactful without the music, and it is a wonderful choice of music for this scene. Now, like I said, I have a lot of nitpicks about this movie, but I think what it brought to the franchise outweighs what it failed to bring back. And for that reason, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Now, I get that the director was really trying to separate himself in an artistic fashion from what had come before, but unfortunately that doesn't always, especially when you're working with such a beloved and established franchise, that doesn't always work as well. And I know it's a hindrance to a director to go into that way, but there's when you're remaking something, there's things that are already there to work with, and if you're not working with them, I think it diminishes the end product. But 4 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend that at the very least, if you haven't seen the movie, you don't plan on seeing the movie, I recommend having a listen to and buying Bootstraps, Stand By Me. Thank you.